Hello, New York Giants fans, and welcome to the Valentine's Views podcast for Friday. It's your post-mortem edition after the Giants' Thursday night football 30-12 loss to the San Francisco 49ers. And here to help me discuss it, break it down, talk about what we saw is Big Blue Views Tony DelGenio. Tony, good morning, and how are you?
Good morning, Ed. I'm doing just fine, thank you.
So, as I wrote in the wee hours of the morning after the game last night, really what we saw Thursday night is pretty much probably what we should have expected to see. The Giants played hard, they competed for a while, but in the end, they didn't have enough to stay with the 49ers, and San Francisco eventually pulled away.
Yeah, I strangely feel okay about the game last night. I think, partly it depends on what you thought your expectations were for the Giants coming into this season. And I didn't expect the Giants to contend for a Super Bowl this season. I want to see progress this season relative to last year. And one measuring stick for me of that progress is can you start to hang with the best teams and not get embarrassed when you play them? Last year, obviously, the Giants got uh, beaten badly by the Eagles, the best team they played twice. And the first time this year, they played the Dallas Cowboys, who I think are probably one of the best teams in the league, and they look like they didn't belong on the same field.
Excuse
Bless you.
me.
San Francisco 49ers are definitely a Super Bowl contending team if they stay healthy. And the Giants hung with them through basically three quarters. They were within 5 points with, I think, 5 minutes to go in the third quarter. Clearly, San Francisco was the better team. They were dominating time of possession. I think they wound up having something like 83 offensive snaps to the Giants' 50 offensive snaps. And we can talk about why if you want, but still, I thought the Giants fought hard and they put forth a good solid effort against a team that's just more talented than they are.
I do think that the biggest thing, and I had written about this before the game as well. I do think the biggest thing that we wanted to see, or at least that I wanted to see, was I did not want to see the Giants embarrass themselves. They embarrassed themselves 2 weeks ago on in the national spotlight against Dallas. They didn't do that last night. The flip side of that is I think the Giants are exactly where you would have thought they would be 3 games into the season. They're at 1-2, and they've shown pretty much that they're still not in the upper echelon of NFL teams. They're still somewhere in the middle of the pack. They're still growing, they're still developing. But I really think that probably they're right where we thought they would be, and right where everybody figured they should be 3 games into the season.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with that. I don't know that I would uh, have anticipated exactly the way in which they were going to have arrived at this point. Uh, I didn't, coming into the season, see the offensive line having such extensive problems as it has had so far. All right, and I thought we would see somewhat more from the defense, especially the run defense, than we've seen so far. But as far as the outcome of these first three games, I don't think anybody can be too shocked that the Giants are 1-2 after three games after seeing who is on the schedule to begin the season.
Yeah, absolutely not. Let's focus on the offense to begin with. And I think it all really revolves around the offensive line. Obviously, the Giants missing Saquon Barkley last night really barely tried to run the ball at all. And we knew this was going to be a difficult matchup. This Arizona had a couple of quality pass rushers, but this is a San Francisco defense with all pros all over the place, especially in that front seven. Giants without Andrew Thomas, without Ben Bredesen, with Shane Lemieux starting basically the third offensive left guard that the Giants have already used this season. That's a young, in some ways, I think, talented group of players, but thrown together, very inexperienced. And I think we got what we should have expected to see. The Giants, I looked at it last night. If you look at next gen stats, they threw 2 passes all night, longer than 20 yards. I think they threw 8 passes out of 32 all night, longer than 10 yards. They protected Daniel Jones by basically playing catch and release and getting the ball out of his hands because they knew that the offensive line wasn't going to hold up. You'd like better from the offensive line, but I can't kill those guys last night because what happened is what we would have expected to happen.
Yeah, I think it looked a lot from that standpoint like the Cowboys game, except that San Francisco doesn't have any one player who's as dominant as Micah Parsons has been this season, and so there weren't outright jailbreaks against the offensive line last night. Instead, what there was just a kind of general push of the 49ers defensive line, shoving the Giants offensive linemen back and collapsing the pocket against Joe. I mean, there was one, I think, kind of iconic play where I guess it was Javon Hargrave just really walked Shane Lemieux all the way back into Jones's lap. And you can just see that Shane Lemieux, at least at this point in his career, he just doesn't have the play strength needed to hold off a guy like Javon Hargrave. And
I could just see Giants fans screaming, "Oh, Lemieux still doesn't know how to pass rush." 3 years later, he still can't pass block. So yeah, that was my first thought when I saw that play. But yeah,
it was true of the line in general. I thought in general they were getting pushed back by the 49ers defensive line.
Right. Absolutely. I think, it was just one of those cases where offensive line wise, they got pushed back. And we'll talk more about the defense later, but they basically got pushed around. They got out physicaled by the 49ers. They got run through by Deebo Samuel. They got run over by George Kittle. As you said, they got shoved around by that defensive line. And it was just, it showed you where the Giants are versus where the 49ers, where the top teams are at this point. And I'm not by any stretch of the imagination going to say that the Giants are terrible, but it's to me, it's yet another sign of how far they still have to go, that they're still really, in a lot of ways, they're still at the beginning with Brian Daboll and Joe Shane.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I agreed. The 49ers are just a really good team. I mean, and as you kind of alluded to, the 49ers may be the most physical team in the NFL. I mean, lots of teams, can be physical like along the defensive line and stuff like that, but the 49ers are physical with their skill players. You don't see too much of that in the NFL. But like, George Kittle, I mean, he's a monster, and there are blocking tight ends who can be monsters too. But George Kittle is a receiving tight end who's a monster blocking, and is a monster when he's got the ball in his hands. And Deebo Samuel may be the most physical wide receiver that the NFL has to offer. So I mean, that is a team that is just physically very, very tough. And yeah, one thing that struck me was that, I was reading Brian Daboll's comments after the game, and repeatedly he was saying in answer to questions, that's a really good team over there. That's a really good team. That's a really good team.
Yeah,
And so,
absolutely.
I think Daboll, if you could take Daboll at his word, I think he's impressed with them also, and realizes that the 49ers are a definite step up in class from the Giants. But I think that will be true for most of the teams the 49ers played this year.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about Daniel Jones. I did not include Daniel Jones in my kudos and wet willies this morning at Big Blue View. Some people would have looked at his numbers, 130 some passing yards, I think, and another interception, which to me was absolutely not his fault. That's on Darren Waller all day. But I couldn't include him in wet willies. Yes, I thought there was maybe one, maybe two throws that he missed. Okay. We can argue all day about the high throw to Darren Waller. As I wrote this morning, I saw Darren Waller make that catch again and again and again in training camp. So yes, it's not a great throw, but yes, I've also seen Darren Waller make that catch.
Yeah, I thought
So
that was 50-50, but,
I thought it was
Jones
too.
had some blame and Waller had some blame.
But I just can't. It comes back to what did you expect to see last night thing. I can't kill Daniel Jones because the whole thing was just get the ball out of the guy's hands and hope that we can make a play, once we complete the pass. It wasn't, let's attack down the field. Let's really try to slice this defense up. San Francisco does have a secondary that you can do some things against if you can hold up in pass protection, but the Giants weren't going to do that last night. The numbers aren't pretty, and I was curious as to why the Giants didn't use Jones in the run game a little bit more, but I can't kill Jones for what we saw last night.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't his best game, but I don't think that he had very many opportunities to do a lot more than what he did. I mean, he was under pressure all night, and he wasn't throwing balls right into the hands of defensive backs or anything like that. As you say, that interception was a ball that Waller probably should have caught. Should have maybe made a stronger move to catch the ball.
Yeah, I thought Waller had his hands really close to his body and just didn't reach out and go get that football.
Yeah. But as you say, when you're getting pressure from the defensive line all night, and unlike the Giants, who got a lot of pressure on Purdy last night, but they did it by blitzing almost all the time.
Yeah, we got to talk about that later too.
The 49ers get pressured, just with their front four, and and their front four is very stout. And then you add to that, they've got two great linebackers there at the second level. And so, again, this is just a really tough team to play against. As you say, the defensive backfield is a little bit vulnerable, and one of their defensive backs, I think Ambry, was out last night. So it was a game you could have attacked downfield, except that you got to get to the point where you can get off a pass downfield. And I think it's very telling that Jalen Hyatt was out there on the field for, I don't remember exactly how many snaps, something like 19, 20 snaps or something like that last night, and he didn't get one target. And part of the reason for that is that if you're going to try to spring a guy like that downfield, you need the time to get the ball to him. And that was not happening last night for him. And so the Giants had very limited options given the offensive line they were able to put out there last night for what they could do on offense. And again, I thought under the circumstances, they didn't do that terrible a job. They were in this game until the end of the third quarter. And the Dallas game was ridiculous, and there were no excuses for how bad they were. Last night, the Giants played like I believe 90% of the NFL would play against that San Francisco team.
Sure. And I do think the offensive line is going to stabilize some. Andrew Thomas will probably play, in a week and a half against Seattle. Ben Bredesen, the starting left guard, may not be a tremendous player, but he's a good player. He'll be back. So the left side of that line should stabilize. Marcus McKethan, to be honest with you, I have no idea what his PFF grade's going to be today. But Marcus McKethan has done some good things. I don't know what they'll do at right guard. I think they've moved on from Mark Lewinsky. I don't know if it'll be McKethan. I don't know if they'll take a look at moving Azudu into that spot. I don't know if they'll sign Justin Pugh. And I like Justin Pugh. I've talked to Pugh. I know Pugh wants to be a Giant. But as I've said before, I think Pugh has been honest that once he signs, he needs a few weeks to get acclimated, to get ready. I mean, he's coming off a torn ACL, no training camp, no practice. He's not a plug and play guy. He's a put him on the practice squad for 3 weeks guy and then see what you've got by mid-season. So he's not a quick fix anyway. I don't know. Are you just in talking about Pugh? I mean, are you in favor of signing Pugh?
I think it all depends on what he looks like. I think the Giants could do worse than have a veteran presence on that offensive line somewhere. I mean, you look at who they're putting out there, and it's all young guys, right? I mean, Evan Neal's in year 2. McKethan is really in year 1, even though he's been in the building for 2 years. Schmitz is a true rookie, right? And Zudo is in year 2, and Andrew Thomas is the grizzled veteran of the line in year 4, right? I mean, so the Giants don't have a Trent Williams there or something like that who's been around forever, right?
Right.
And so having a veteran, I mean, this is what Glowinski was supposed to be, right? He was supposed to be that kind of stabilizing veteran presence for the team on the offensive line. He just hasn't been able to hold up in pass protection, and so I think you're right that this may be the last that we've seen of him in game action for the Giants, at least in any significant way, unless somebody gets hurt. The way he wound up getting back into the game last week in Arizona. But if Justin Pugh looks like he can still play, I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to the idea of them signing him, just so that they have one veteran guy on the offensive line.
Sure. Let's talk a little bit about the wide receiver group. We talked a little bit about Hyatt, and I know people are going to gnash their teeth and be upset that I think Hyatt played 16 snaps last night, and they're going to wonder why he's not playing more. And I think perhaps going forward, we'll see his snaps increase. I kind of think they have to, because the Giants have got to create more explosive plays. I was really happy to see Wan'Dale Robinson look comfortable in his return on Thursday night. Caught 4 balls, I think, for 21 yards. Nothing big, all underneath stuff, but he looked comfortable. He looked crisp. He didn't look to have any fear, and I think he's only going to get better. Personally, I think that going forward, I think you have to see more of Hyatt. You have to see more of Wan'Dale Robinson, and maybe a little bit less of Paris Campbell.
Yeah, I would agree with all that. I'll add a couple of things to that. The thing about Paris Campbell is that when I watch him, I feel like the Giants haven't figured out what to do with him yet, and what they are trying to do with him yet, he doesn't seem to be very good at. And I agree with you. Wan'Dale Robinson looked to me in the little we saw him last night, looked like he did last year. And so for a guy coming back from an ACL, if he looks like he did last year, then that's a victory. That means that he really is fully recovered. And Wan'Dale Robinson was coming on last year when he got hurt, and so I think he'd be a nice addition to the offense, and we will see more of him every week. As far as Jalen Hyatt goes, the Giants had a total of 50 offensive snaps last night. Okay. And so the 49ers had 83 offensive snaps. And
so nobody's going to get the snaps you'd like them to get.
I was going to say, so, and basically what, that was telling you was the Giants had a lot of 3 and outs last night. And if you do the math, obviously they weren't all 3 and outs. The Giants had a nice first drive, for example, but if you divide 50 by 3, that's like 17 drives or something like that. And that's about the number of plays that Hyatt was on the field. And so, yeah, I think he was kind of seeing the field enough, but between the fact that the Giants weren't converting third downs, and the fact that Jones was being rushed so much and had to get the ball out of his hands so quickly, just limited their ability to try to use him. I believe, based on what Dable said last night after the game, that they did have some deep shots in the game plan, but they just weren't able to take advantage of them because the pass rush just didn't let them, get those plays off. And they always had to do something closer to the line of scrimmage. So again, it comes down to the offensive line. If your offensive line blocks, that opens up the entire playbook for you. And, to me, Jalen Hyatt is not a guy you want to use around the line of scrimmage, even though he has been used that way some. You want to use him downfield. Paris Campbell, the guy's got the speed. I would like to see him just go out and run a route downfield a couple of times, because it seems like whenever they try to target him, it's the same type of play near the line of scrimmage. And he just doesn't seem to be particularly talented at running those types of plays. And so I agree with you that he probably is going to get fewer snaps and Wandale's going to get more. But when he does get his snaps, I wish they would try something different with him, something that's a little bit unexpected.
The last thing I'll say about offense and Paris Campbell is I think that the way that they're using Paris Campbell is really the role that they had in mind for Wandale Robinson. The screens, the not necessarily all the gadget stuff, but the orbit motions and coming out of the backfield, and that's all stuff that Wandale Robinson did in college. That's all stuff that feels like what his strong suit is. And I think that's one of the reasons why Robinson's probably going to take snaps from Campbell, as we go forward. But yeah, I think there's still pieces there. It just comes back to what we've worried about all offseason is you can't use those pieces and you can't stretch the field and get those explosive plays if you can't keep the quarterback upright long enough to make those things happen.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, just before we move off offense, Tony, interesting that Saquon Barkley admitted to Taylor Rooks of Prime Video last night that he does have a high ankle sprain. The Giants tried to tell us he didn't. I thought it was pretty obvious that he did when they said that the timeline for him to return was 3 weeks, because I think even you and I can recover from a normal ankle sprain in less than 3 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah, right. And we're not pounding the ball against NFL defensive lines.
No, and we're not young anymore either. So
we're not.
No,
Wait a minute. I thought I was still young.
Young at heart. Young at heart.
Yeah, young at heart.
That's and that's what matters. But all right, Tony, let's turn our attention to the defensive side of the ball. The Giants obviously atrocious last night on third down. Gave up in one drive. They gave up a 3rd and 15, a 3rd and 13, and a touchdown on 3rd and 5 from the 9. And they gave up 2 or 3 other first downs on 3rd and more than 10. I don't know if that's just because Kyle Shanahan is so good at what he does, or that the 49ers had better athletes. Maybe it's a combination of both, but you can't win that way. You just can't win when you can't get off the field on 3rd down.
Yeah, so I think it was a combination of things. Okay, first of all, George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, and now throw Christian McCaffrey, who we haven't mentioned yet, in there. Those are 3 of the best offensive players in the NFL, and 3 of the toughest offensive players in the NFL. And so, part of that, I think you have to tip your cap to those guys. They are just really, really plus players. And one of the most telling statistics from the game last night was that I think more than 50% of the 49ers passing yardage or receiving yardage was yards after catch. Okay, and a lot of that you've just got to tip your cap to those players who are just amazing football players. But the flip side of the coin is that the Giants at this point are a very poor tackling team as well. And I think when the PFF grades come out later on today, I think you're going to see probably pretty low tackling grades across the board. And this is an ongoing thing, I believe, for the Giants. Yeah, I think it's a defense-wide problem. I didn't see it in everyone last night. And before we wrap up today, I think we need to have a shout out to Micah McFadden, who has been much maligned in Giants circles, including by me ever since he joined the team. But I thought he had a tremendous game last night, and he was a guy who was mostly making tackles, even in the backfield, not missing them. But you look at other guys. I mean, the Giants defensive backs are not great tacklers. I mean, Xavier McKinney was missing tackle after tackle last night. The other Giants players were letting McCaffrey just blow past them on running plays up the middle, and it was pretty frustrating to watch, even though I had to remind myself, yeah, they're playing against great players. Still, the Giants are not a great tackling team, and that's a lot of the reason they weren't getting off the field on third down last night.
Right. As you mentioned, I'm looking at the numbers from Next Gen Stats, Tony, and 215 of 310 passing yards after the catch. That's almost 70%. That's just an insane number. And as you said, partially, tip your cap to the 49ers, but there's just not enough physicality being brought by a lot of guys in that secondary. McKinney, every time I see McKinney so far this year, he's getting run over, getting run through. So I don't know what's going on there with Xavier McKinney, but it's not the player that we saw a couple of years ago. You're right about McFadden. Kudos to him. It's funny because Carl Banks had said on his podcast during the week that McFadden was in position to make plays. The problem against Arizona was that he didn't bring his pads, he didn't bring the physicality, and he didn't make those plays. To his credit, last night he put himself in position and he attacked the football. He did make those plays. But Tony, we have to talk about the Giants got 2 sacks last night. But dear God, according to Next Gen Stats, 33 out of 39 Brock Purdy dropbacks, Wink Martindale dialed up some sort of blitz. That's 84.6%, and the highest blitz rate in the Next Gen Stats era. That's just insane. It's like Martindale just said, "The heck with it. We're just throwing everybody at this quarterback, and we'll see what happens." It was insane.
Yeah, and my reaction was, well, good for him. I mean, it was affecting Purdy early in the game, and in the first half, Purdy was clearly bothered by the pressure, and he effectively threw some balls. I mean, he didn't actually throw them away, but he really got rid of the ball quick as he was kind of drifting backward, and he was throwing sooner than he wanted to throw on some of those. I mean, I have to say, I've got tremendous respect for Brock Purdy after watching him play last night. I mean, it's not the first time I've seen him play, but he's a real NFL quarterback. And granted, he's got great weapons to work with, but he's an impressive quarterback in his own right. Doesn't have the greatest arm in the world, but he knows how to play football, and he knows how to read defenses, and props to him. But I guess my reaction to all of the blitzing is that, well, if that's what you need to get pressure, then Okay, you do that, and you won't do it every week necessarily. But again,
No,
you know that the team you're playing against is a team that you can't just match up with mano a mano
right,
and beat them. And so you say,
right,
okay, here's a team that we probably should not beat. How do we change that script and beat them anyway, even though they're more
right.
talented? And so that was his answer to how to do that, and that is
Mhm.
bring everything. If they're bringing everything against Seattle in 10 days, then I'll be disappointed because Seattle is to my mind anyway, a team that's on the same level as the Giants. They're two teams that are probably competing for a wild card spot. They've each got pros, they've each got cons. Neither team is a threat to win the Super Bowl this year. And you don't want to see the Giants have to completely sell out in order to stop a team like Seattle. You'd like to hope that they could kind of trade punches with them and win on even terms enough to win the game. But against San Francisco, I mean, it's amazing to have seen, but I can't really blame him for doing it.
No, nor can I. Tony, we have to talk about Trey Hawkins a little bit. Really tremendous story through training camp, through the preseason, 6th round pick out of a smaller school in Old Dominion. Figured to be a developmental cornerback, guy that played mostly on special teams, worked his way into starting cornerback role, but it really hasn't been good for Hawkins through 3 games. 145 point something passer rating through 3 games, according to Pro Football Reference. Awful missed tackle last night. I have a comment here, on our YouTube channel. Somebody said that it looked like he made a business decision, and I think that's nonsense. I think he was just out of position and missed the tackle. But you have to wonder if at some point, now Darnay Holmes is not a great player. Okay, he's not a great player. He played well last night. He did some good things last night. But you have to wonder if at some point the Giants go to Holmes in the slot and put Adoree Jackson back outside most of the time where he truly belongs. He's doing the best he can in the slot, but he's not 100%. He's not really comfortable in there. He's competing, but it's not the best usage of his talent. And I just wonder how long the Giants can ride with Trey Hawkins out there and Jackson in the slot.
So my feeling is that okay. So Trey Hawkins did not have a good game last night. I thought he had a pretty good game against Arizona. I watched Nick Filato put together a compilation of all of Trey Hawkins snaps in the Cardinals game, and Trey Hawkins looked to me pretty good against the Cardinals. They certainly weren't targeting him, and the reason they weren't targeting him is that the guys he was covering were not really open very much, and so I'm willing to pass last night off uh, as just a learning experience for him. I think we'll see going forward. I think as far as what you're suggesting, I suspect it's going to vary from opponent to opponent, and I think it depends on who it is he'd be covering on the boundary as to whether you want to put Darnay on the field in the slot and then go back to Adoree on the boundary. The thing about Darnay, yeah, and you have to think, the flip side of that is, okay, what do you gain by putting a Darnay in the slot? And to me, I think the answer to that is the slot receiver on the other team a bigger, more imposing receiver or not? So, putting Darnay Holmes on a big receiver is just not going to do much for you. Putting Darnay Holmes on a really elite receiver like CD Lamb, let's say, is probably not going to do much for you. But there may be other receivers that Darnay can handle the load.
Mhm.
The Giants' next game up, they're going to have to deal with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett on the boundary. And so, would you rather see who of the Giants cornerbacks do you want to see trying to guard DK Metcalf? I mean, that's, that's the, I think, part of the question. But then they have the rookie Jackson Smith-Njigba in the slot. And who do you think would do a better job on him in the slot? Would Adoree do a better job in the slot, or is that a guy that Darnay could handle? I don't know the answer to that, but I think that's the type of calculation you have to do. I think it's a week by week thing, and decide where are the better matchups for the Giants depending on what they do.
And it may be a decision that the Giants have already made, to be honest. I mean, Wink Martindale said at the beginning of the season that there would be hiccups with Hawkins and there would be hiccups with Tay Banks. And it may just be the kind of thing where they feel like these two guys are the guys they want to go forward with. And with a young team, and a little bit like we talked about on the offensive line, as these guys grow and develop, you have to live with hiccups. Sometimes you have to live with mistakes. You have to live with a missed tackle. I mean, that was an egregious missed tackle last night by Hawkins. I think it was his third penalty in 2 games, but we'll see what they do. I just thought the way that Darnay Holmes played in his limited snaps last night, it makes you wonder if they'll look at that and think maybe we've got to get Darnay on the field a little bit more.
Yeah, and one of the, I think, interesting things to me is about who the Giants make active versus inactive for any game. And correct me if I'm wrong, the Giants have been switching back and forth between making Cordale Flott inactive and making Darnay Holmes inactive in the first few games. And so maybe we get a clue about their plans for Darnay Holmes by what happens with that inactive slot as we go forward. If it turns out that Cordale Flott's being made inactive every week, then that's maybe sending a message that they think it's worth having Darnay Holmes on the field. If they're going to go back and forth week to week and just alternate Darnay and Cordale, then maybe that means that they still don't think that highly of him, and so since they don't think that highly, they'll try both guys depending on the opponent. So I think maybe they'll tell us without telling us what their plans are for these guys by whether they make the move that you're talking about and moving Adoree back to the boundary, whether they make Darnay Holmes active on a consistent basis or not. Then we'll know what they think, even though they won't actually say it in words during any of the pressers.
Absolutely. It's interesting also, we have a question about Jordan Riley and about why he was inactive again. And Tony, I don't know why the Giants chose DJ Davidson to be active the last 2 games over Jordan Riley. I think they still see Riley as a guy who has a lot to learn. My guess is, as imposing as he can be and as many plays as he can make, my guess is they're still not sure about his ability to be assignment sound and understand exactly what he's supposed to do on each play. That being said, I thought DJ Davidson was good against Arizona, and I thought he was really good last night until he left the game with that arm injury. And we don't know the extent of the injury to Davidson. We also don't know the extent of the injury to Tay Banks. And we talked about what to do at cornerback. And if Tay Banks is going to miss time, that obviously kind of makes that discussion moot. And if Davidson's going to miss time, it probably makes asking why Jordan Riley's inactive moot as well.
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned DJ Davidson, because the Giants have had one player in each of the past 2 drafts, both defensive linemen, that the reaction of the Giants community to the drafting of those people is, who and why did they draft that guy? And I would say of all of Joe Shane's draft picks, the least amount of buzz for any of them has been for those two guys, Davidson last year and Riley this year.
Mhm.
Yet Riley looked good in the one game that he played against Dallas, and I agree with you. I thought DJ Davidson played well last night, and again he was a guy. I mean he's another one of these guys who lost his rookie year completely due to injury. But it's okay. The guy looks like he has some talent, and if I take the glass half full side of that story, I'd say, well, maybe they have two young interior defensive linemen who might develop into something pretty useful.
And Tony, how can we go through the whole show? We're almost at the end here, but how can we not mention the Scottish Hammer? How can we not at least give some props to Jamie Gillen, the much criticized, the much analyzed, the much debated left-footed punter? I mean, I know he's inconsistent as all get out sometimes, but good Lord, was he hitting rockets last night?
And
He
not
was
just rockets, not just rockets, but positioning the ball well. I mean, he had
and
that punt in. I was it the second quarter where
and
he had
hitting
the
them
punt from the end zone,
and
and
hitting them a
he hit
mile high.
right, and like about that, it seemed like I went 60 yards downfield. I don't know. I think it went
He,
about 60 yards downfield. But the most important thing, it was angling toward the sideline, and the punt returner caught the ball, and his own momentum carried him out of bounds. So
he had
they
a
went
fair
from being on their own 5 yard line to San Francisco having the ball to start on their own 32. And that was tremendous. That was the best punt I've ever seen Jamie Gillen hit.
I wrote this morning that I don't think I have ever seen a 60-yard punt angled to the sideline and caught right on the out of bounds marker that had to be fair caught. A 60-yard punt that had to be fair caught. That's insanity.
Yeah.
And it speaks to what Jamie Gillen did last night. People asked all of last year, and they've been asking all of this year because we've seen him outkick his coverage. We've seen him not place the ball properly at times. People keep saying, why do they stick with this guy? Why don't they have someone challenge him for his job? Why don't they move on? I've seen some of this in practice from Jamie Gillen. I've seen him hit the ball so high that you're not sure it's ever going to come down. But last night, he showed you the talent, and he showed you why the Giants don't want to give up on him, because that was just a crazy display of punting last night.
Yeah, and that one punt in I believe the second quarter, that was when the game was still up for grabs, and it looked like the 49ers were about to have a short field. You figured that they were going to get the ball at midfield or even
Mhm.
inside Giants territory, and you say they go right down for a touchdown, and it's the beginning of the onslaught. And instead he just flipped the field completely, and you say, wow, if he can do that, I mean, no punter can do that all the time, but if he can do that on any kind of consistent basis, then that's a tremendous weapon for a team that obviously still is struggling offensively.
Absolutely. And a quick shout out to Graham Gano for another 57-yard field goal last night. The guy just, I don't know, Mr. Consistent, Mr. Automatic. It's just amazing that a guy lines up for a 57-yard field goal, and you're sitting there thinking, I'll be shocked if he misses it.
And I read on Twitter last night, I don't know if this is true, but somebody said on Twitter that in warmups he was missing from 53 at that end of the field. Yet yet when the bell rings, he goes out there and makes it from 57 and made it, I think, with yards to spare. I mean, he's just a tremendous asset for them. And I don't know when he's gonna wear down. He's getting on in years, and they extended his contract, but boy, I'll take him as long as I can take him, because when you don't have a dominant offense, to be able to just come away with 3 points when you get the ball anywhere near scoring position is such an asset to have.
Absolutely. All right, Tony. Giants have a week and a half here to rest up, to to figure out where they want to go, what changes they want to make. So we'll see what happens in week 4 against the Seattle Seahawks. And Giants fans, thank you as always for listening. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.